hold hands and close your eyes. It's midnight, and you're listening to the Ghost Story Guys. Welcome to the Ghost Story Guys. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestel.
And this is a show where we talk about spooks, specters, and all the other things watching us from the shadows beyond the campfire. Some conversations only make sense after the sun has set, and this is most definitely one. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 189. 189, goddamn. And we're coming to you from that tiny mountain cabin you dream about, but can never quite reach. Paul Q. Bestel, my friend, how you doing?
I'm all right, my friend. I'm all right. Disappointed that we weren't abducted by aliens at the beginning of the week, but it always pays to investigate and find out exactly what you saw before you tell everybody in the world that you think you've seen something else. I
do admire that. Yeah, you sent me some video footage on Monday that turned out to be the ISS, which again, very much a letdown because that would have been cool as hell.
Yes. As Julie said on the audio, do you think we're going to get abducted?
The universe is vast, and every day is a new chance to be abducted by aliens.
Absolutely, yes. So yeah, it was a strange event, but I've got over the disappointment, and I'm moving on with my life.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I went into Toronto over the weekend on Saturday night. It was my friend's birthday, so I think he's 35, the son of a bitch. My friends, they went to go to a football match. I went to go see a 35mm presentation of the classic 90s horror film Shakma about a baboon or an orangutan that goes apeshit. All right, don't patronize me, you son of a bitch.
Well, technically, it's not an ape; it's a monkey.
Well, he goes monkey shit then. All right, fine.
Baboon.
Thank you. Yeah, Typhoon. Yeah, played by Typhoon the baboon.
What? A brilliant name.
I know, it's great, and the movie's a ton of fun. It knows exactly what it is. And I will say the thing I learned from watching Shakma, comparing it to Haunting of Hill House, which also I think has a baboon or some kind of ape, which is represented in CG. And I think this is the way to go because most of the time, Typhoon the baboon, he just seems like he's kind of chilling. You know, he doesn't seem real upset about much. Once or twice he looks at the camera, much the same way I look at people when I get out of bed, you know? And even when he really goes nuts, because they've got that sort of the hair around their upper body, it's just twirling. He just looks like David Bowie doing a dance. Like he looks fabulous more than he does angry. That was Shakma. That was my evening in Toronto. And then we met up at a whiskey bar that we had been to the last time we were there for my birthday. And I genuinely think they kept turning up the music to chase all us olds out of the place. Because at one point I was paying my bill, or waiting for my friend to pay his bill, and I heard this sound, like it was the bass was so intense that, you know, again, you could feel it inside, right? But I was hearing this like, and I realized that the plate in front of me had a knife on it, and it was just vibrating.
Wow.
In the plate. And I just very carefully picked it up, moved it off, and just gently set it down on the table. And the waitress saw me do this, and she started, it was the one thing that could make her laugh, is my clear disappointment in the situation in which I'd found myself. God almighty. I'm like, no, we're not doing this. I have to go somewhere it's quieter. I am too old for this shit. I didn't even like it when I was in my 20s. Now that I'm in my early 40s, not happening.
See, if I'd have been there, I'd have been, oh, this bass sounds meaty. Let's make it the cutlery dance. It's that deep. Bring it.
If you ever want to know which one of us is more fun, I don't think that's ever really been a question, but if that is a question you ever ask yourself, and, well, Paul Bestel is the answer.
Yes, it was very similar to that at Moderat at the Alexandra Palace a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
That was a sonic drenching. It was amazing.
I was going to build off that to talk about the topic of the podcast, but I don't think I want drenching to be the jumping off point. Oh, there we go. So, just as I was under pressure from the terrifying bass at the Whiskey Lounge in Toronto This episode is about scenes of paranormal pressure. We have stories of people feeling compressed and sort of oppressed by paranormal presence. We have sort of the feeling of being touched by invisible hands, all of which are listener stories, all of which are very, very cool. There's even a story of missing time, which is genuinely one of my favorite phenomena to report on this show. And I'm very, very excited to share that with our listeners. But before we do that, we got to thank our patrons.
This one's for the patrons.
Patrons, we could not do what we do without you. So thank you. Thank you, thank you. And really, guys, ads really aren't a reliable source of income. Patreon is how we are able to survive and do this. And so to every one of you, we say thank you. We are deeply, deeply appreciative of everyone who supports the show. Even if you can't afford to support us on Patreon, we appreciate you too. But the folks who can financially support the show, either through Patreon, Apple Podcasts, or very soon YouTube, you are directly responsible for our continued success. And so thank you. And while we'd like to thank all our patrons, we would especially like to thank our latest patrons. They are
Roberta Newman
and Jillian M. Again, thank you so much for your generous support of this show. And if you would like to help us out, if you'd like to help keep the show going, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. And we'll wait till the end of the show to tell you about all the cool stuff you get. But we will say for $1 a month over at Patreon, you get an ad-free feed. And who doesn't want that? Ads suck. Again, we don't like them, and we're happy to have a place where you don't have to listen to them. And you get ad-free episodes on Apple Podcasts. Again, you will get them on YouTube when we get that set up. We're hoping for the 1st of June that will be a thing. So if you are a regular YouTube listener, you want the bonus stuff that all the other folks are getting, we will soon have a way for you to get access to that. But if you want to take advantage of all that cool stuff, patreon.com/ghoststoryguys, or sign up to Ghost Story Guys Premium via Apple Podcasts. All right, one last thing before we get to the stories. Shout out to our composer, Rainy Days for Ghosts. Rainy Days for Ghosts is a project of the film journalist and composer Harper Smith. You can find more of Harper's work at rainydaysforghosts.bandcamp.com or by searching for Rainy Days for Ghosts and Street Witch on streaming platforms everywhere. One final thing, I swear. I wanted to congratulate Harper because on May 13th, she was part of the Scored to Death signing event at Dark Delicacies in Los Angeles. She's one of a group of composers whose work was included in a compilation called Scored to Death. I think it's Scored to Death 2. And she was signing autographs alongside some truly, truly great horror composers like Joseph Bishara, Harry Manfredini, Alan Howarth. I know that had to have been huge for Harper. So I just want to say congratulations to her for that. Because again, she's an extraordinarily talented composer. We're very lucky to be working with her on this show. And it's nice to see talented people get recognition for what they do. All right. We are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with the stories. Our first story is called Presence. It comes from Hannah. Hannah says, "Hey guys, I just wanted to start off by saying I love your podcast and I'm an avid listener, so I hope this story finds you well. I cannot say I've ever come much into contact with the paranormal or really even believe in it. However, I did experience some very strange and unexplainable phenomena in my childhood. So, in saying that, I'll get started. I am a 22-year-old woman and grew up in a small town near Bath in the southwest of England. Me, my older sister, mum and dad lived there a total of 15 years. The house itself was completely normal, no more than 30 years old, perfect for a new family of 4, and for the first 10 years, nothing of note actually occurred. Then, it did. I never saw any classic spooky apparitions or heard strange noises in the night, but something was certainly lurking around the home. The first experience I had, I was around 9 or 10 years old. I was having a sleepover in my sister's room. We used to do this all the time. It was a lot of fun. She had a bunk bed and I would sleep on a mattress on the floor. This particular night, though, I crawled up into bed with my sister. This is important. Come the morning, my mom asked how we slept, and she mentioned she came to check on us in the night and had seen me sleeping soundly on the floor. This confused both me and my sister, and we explained how I never slept on the mattress, but I was on the bunk bed all night. But Mom said she definitely saw me, breathing, eyes shut, peacefully asleep on the floor. We never came up with a reasonable explanation, so we agreed to let it slip into the back of our minds. A few years later, I woke up in the night to see a bright white light moving slowly and flashing incrementally under my door, which directly faced the landing. I naturally assumed my sister was messing with me, but again, come the morning, no one owned up to it. There was no storm, no thunder or lightning, so another strange occurrence swept under the rug. Things were extremely normal until my mid-teenage years, when the most notable incident happened to me. In the evening, I was getting ready to settle down for the night before school and set my phone down in the center of the bedside table. I stood up to leave the room and saw the phone inch ever so slightly over until it slid and flew off the surface into the center of the room. I stood for a moment looking at the photo and honestly felt nothing. I just picked it up and placed it back. This was very common with each occurrence. No feelings of fear or a threatening presence, just odd occurrences that happened far apart in time with no real coherency or connection. The only real common shared experience that ever happened in the house was felt by my mom, sister, and eventually our dog. It was a sensation of being watched. Our dog would sit and stare at space, twitching his head and barking. Perhaps he heard something we didn't, and this could easily be chalked up to just that, but the innate feeling of being seen was hard to ignore. The next phenomenon was first felt only by my mom, but eventually by me as well. On occasion, my mom would sleep in the living room, but after a few nights she stopped completely and would instead bunk with me or my sister. When discussing my own experiences a few years on, my mom shared her own. She explained that when in the living room, she would lay there on the sofa in the dark and feel the presence of a hand lightly brushing the top of her head, as if slowly caressing her hair. No matter where she slept, if she scratched, rubbed, or flattened the hair, nothing would stop this sensation. It had made her feel uneasy, and she stopped sleeping down there altogether. Skip to the weeks leading up to us moving. I began feeling the same sensation when in my own room trying to fall asleep. Instead of caressing the hair, I felt the presence hovering above my face, grazing my eyes and the tip of my nose. This happened night after night, paired with light scratches and a particularly dark corner of the room, darker than the rest. Being alone in my room during the night became unbearable, like someone was lurking around trying to make me feel afraid. And it worked. The day we moved out was one of the best of my life. As I'm typing these out, I know they sound rather uneventful, not the typical ghosty encounters, but nearly 7 years on, they still pop into my mind, and I still feel something was happening in the house that wasn't particularly normal, and I haven't felt or experienced since. I also want to note that both me and my sister had a really happy childhood in that home, bar these few odd encounters. They weren't ever really acknowledged and had no effect on daily life in the house, but nonetheless were still abnormal enough to be memorable for the three of us. I hope you guys can maybe give me a little insight into what these could be. Natural phenomena or something commonly experienced. Any thoughts at all would be greatly appreciated, as I've never been able to explain it to myself, nor have the rest of my family. And so, Hannah, thank you for sharing that. Paul, what do you think?
The problem you often have with things like this is the need for an explanation, and I think often you can't really explain some phenomena because it just seems really odd and strange, and there doesn't seem to be a reason for it or a catalyst for it. It just seems to be around the people living in that particular area at that particular time. And it's strange, especially when you get incidents in regards to notorious haunted locations, shall we say, where, say, perhaps somebody claims to have been terrified out of their house after 28 days, and yet nobody else has ever reported anything before or since. Now, that particular case may just be a sham. However, there are lots of other examples of people who lived in haunted houses where other people seem to have lived quite happily. So it falls into that. Is it the person that's a magnet for it? Does it just react to certain types of people? I know we've kind of touched on why do some people have experiences and others don't. And I think there are so many catalysts involved that it's hard to kind of underpin any real reasons for it, unfortunately. But I think it's far better to go, I don't know, than to say, well, clearly there's a demon living under the floorboards and it's going to eat your feet.
I mean, unless you have a particularly popular podcast that maybe depends on making bullshit up. Anyways.
Enough of Danny Robbins. Leave him alone.
I will fight you, Danny Robbins. I will fist fight you. You'll probably win, but it's the principle of the thing. I got nothing against you. I don't know. Feel like it'd be good publicity.
He's in North America at the minute.
Oh, is he?
Well, he was. The new season of Uncanny's all North American cases.
Oh, shit. Okay. Oh, well, Danny, we got to throw hands now.
Do it after the tour's finished.
Yeah, okay. There we go. When are you going to see that?
Yes.
Nice. When is that?
Amongst numerous other things happening in June.
Oh, shit. Okay.
June. It's only 30 days. I've got so much to do. I'm going hunting for shucks tomorrow.
Oh, cool. Whereabouts?
I'm going to Haworth, Bronte country.
Oh, okay.
See if I can find Bramwell.
I love Dracula. Did I get it? Did I get it right? Sharon Lois and Bramwell?
No.
Okay, well, it was worth a shot. I tried. Not hard, but I tried.
Good effort.
Yeah, thank you. I put all my effort into training to beat up Danny Robbins, so.
One battle at a time.
So yeah, Hannah, unfortunately, we like to say these things very rarely have any kind of, no one really knows, right? You can't explain. It's hard to say. I mean, I just kind of take it as like you sort of have to factor it into your worldview. You know, even if you can't explain it, you just got to sort of roll it into your life experience and say, well, I guess that's a thing that happened and can happen. I will say I'd be absolutely fuming if a ghost moved my damn phone.
Well, I suppose, you know, they'll just move anything about, won't they? They're not really bothered. But yeah, stop sliding those phones off things. Ghosts, all right.
When she first described it, I kind of thought it was maybe that thing that happens with water. You know, if you got a little bit of water on the surface, it kind of can make something move. But yeah, that doesn't typically throw things off at speed.
No, not at all. That kind of reaction. Even if you wanted to drill down to it and say, well, perhaps it's the oil off your fingers that's on the back of your phone, you'd have to have a very greasy phone, which would be like handling a bar of soap, I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't want to know what your life involves if your phone is that oily. I just don't want to know.
Don't shake my hand,
nope.
You dirty bugger.
We're not saying that you've done this, Hannah, just to be clear.
No, not you, Hannah.
Danny Robbins. I really think he's great. I don't know why I keep saying this shit. Danny, I'm sorry if you're listening. I'm a fan. Have me on your show. I won't challenge you to a fight, I promise.
I mean, the strange... I mean, obviously, we mentioned it, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago. You know, we were talking about exploding head syndrome.
Yep.
And I was on about that weird stage where I kept feeling 3 taps on the top of my head.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I always thought that was what exploding head syndrome was, but it isn't. So I have no fucking idea what that is. And so when you have things that are like sort of playing with your hair and things, it's, you know, it's one of those, I mean, people's hair just doesn't start going like that on its own. You know, it's not the 80s where your hairspray is kind of breaking down and so your hair will zing up or start curling up because there's too much humidity in the room or something. It's a very distinct thing. You can always feel if something's stroking or caressing your hair because it's a very physical sensation. It's not like a spider runs across your face or something like that. It's not that kind of thing. It's a very physical reaction to it. So it can't be sort of dismissed as imaginary or whatever because it's a very real sensation. You know that something is stroking your hair. You can feel it.
Yeah. And I got so distracted trying to engage in Mortal Kombat with the host of BBC's Uncanny that I completely forgot to mention that when Hannah sent this in, I was in Victoria and Nick was experiencing exactly the same thing. We'd be sitting on the couch, you know, kind of like cuddling, watching TV, and she'd go, it feels like someone is stroking my head. And she's had before this, sometimes we think maybe it's like presence or we don't know who or what or why, but she'll feel this sort of tingling at the top of her head, you know, kind of like underneath the hair. But this actually felt like someone was stroking her hair. So we always take it as kind of a soothing thing, you know, meant to be like someone kind of like just being reassuring. But I don't know whether that's the same in your case or not, Hannah.
Yeah, it's not reassuring when you're laid on your own settee at 3 a.m. in the morning in the dark, though, is it? At that moment, you want it to be the dog.
Maybe the ghost, like me, doesn't understand context cues.
Maybe it's from the old times, and therefore it doesn't understand the social cues and behaviours that we should expect of our spirits in this modern era.
Yeah, the ghost is bitching to all his ghost friends. Well, you can't haunt anyone these days.
Yeah, I've been cancelled. I scared a kid the other week. I put him in therapy. They've sent me the bill. What's going on?
You know whose fault it is, Paul? Danny Robbins.
I was going to blame Ebenezer Scrooge, but okay.
We know who the real villain is here. Dance back, Danny Robbins. Dance back. I don't know why. Jesus Christ. God, let's hope he's not litigious. That's how Bren moved to Guam.
I'm just a co-host, Danny. Touch from Morgan. Hi, I've been listening to your podcast for quite some time now, and there's been a specific topic that you have spoken about that has piqued my interest due to my own experiences, and that's bad energy potentially increasing paranormal activity. For context, I moved into an old flat when I was 18, with the building being built sometime in the 1800s. Soon after, I got pregnant and started suffering from severe mental health issues. On top of this, my relationship was suffering, and I started to feel a dark presence watching me. The air started to feel quite heavy, and I started to feel quite unsafe, but I just assumed that this was because I wasn't in a great headspace. After I'd had my baby, I ended up with quite severe postnatal depression. Fast forward a few months, and weird things started happening. Things would go flying off my kitchen countertops, I would hear things moving about in other rooms, and things would go missing and appear in the same place hours after. The most spooky thing of all is that I would always feel something play with my hair or touch my head in one corner of the living room. It was always so cold in that area, even in the summer. I'd originally put this down to baby brain and didn't tell anyone, but then other people started experiencing weird things in my flat too. My partner would often have a friend come round a lot, and more often than not, he'd end up falling asleep on the couch and staying the night. This soon stopped after he started experiencing something touching his head too. His breaking point was when he was wearing a baseball cap and something flipped it off his head. Me, my partner, and another friend were there, and so it happened, and we were all in complete disbelief. I never even told anybody about the head touching until then, as I didn't want to seem like I was going crazy.
Ghost couldn't help himself. You're wearing a baseball cap inside? Were you Marky Mark in 1995? Get the fuck out of here.
Or my brother through the 90s.
Again, that's fine. It's the 90s. But I feel like the guy who stays on your couch when you already have like a kid is the guy who wears a baseball cap in your house. Go home. Yeah, right? Get a life of your own, my friend. You can't stay here anymore, Danny Robbins. I told you, you have to leave my apartment. I'll stop. I probably won't stop. I'll try, though.
My boyfriend was there for about half of the occasions where things would go flying off the countertops in the kitchen or just go missing, so I knew I wasn't going crazy about that. At first, his immediate reaction would always be to accuse me of being crazy, as he didn't believe in the paranormal. Yeah, there's a theme we've not visited for quite a while.
Right?
That microwave's flown off the counter. Have you had your tablets today?
Yeah, right.
Are you sure that happened? There were also quite a few occasions where I woke up at the early hours of the morning to see a swirled distortion on my ceiling that would move around, though I think that could have been a possibility that it was just sleep deprivation. However, I had smooth flat ceiling, so I didn't have any of that pattern nonsense. I've since moved out and I haven't experienced anything since. No touching, nothing going missing, no more feeling watched and feeling unsafe. Absolutely nothing. The air feels clear. Mine and my partner's relationship is the best it's ever been. I do feel bad for the new tenants, as I'm sure my bad vibes and vulnerability invited something in, along with having a baby. What do you think? One last thing. I'm sure you get told this a lot, but thank you so much for talking about mental health and creating a space to be able to freely talk about these experiences. I wish I'd found this podcast back then. It would have helped a ton. Thank you and kind regards, Morgan.
So I thought it was interesting that we had multiple stories about sort of touch and pressure kind of coming in around, roughly around the same time, because this came in about the same time Hannah's did. I will say, Morgan, I don't think you invited anything in. No. I think it's, and you don't want to assume the blame for those kinds of things. We all know that Danny Robbins is at fault here.
Clearly. There's a pattern developing, isn't there?
There sure is.
Are you saying Danny Robbins is Gozer?
I'm not saying he's not. I'm just saying we've never seen them in the same place together.
That's a very valid point.
Teach the controversy. I'm going to let this go now. I don't know why this has got in my head. I just have fixated on this. But anyways, going back to Morgan's story. Yeah, again, I always hesitate to kind of blame yourself for this kind of stuff because I don't think it works like that. Like, I think you can invoke things. I do think that's possible to do. But I think sometimes these things just happen. I mean, it may be that you also had postnatal depression, which is no joke, by the way. That shit is real and dangerous. Yep. So, I mean, congratulations. Good on you for getting through that. Postnatal depression can be a real motherfucker. It can change your life. So, yeah, if you think you might be having postnatal depression, do not hesitate to seek treatment. Intrusive thoughts, all that stuff. Keep an eye on it, guys, because that'll fuck you up.
Well, I think it's one of those things as well that in certain aspects of modern paranormal entertainment, people are often blamed for the problems in their home, which is bullshit more often than not. I
think it's kind of a vestige, like a holdover from religion.
Yeah, it is. It's going back to it's satanic panic nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, you've been listening to Iron Maiden, therefore you must want to kill everyone. What?
Oh.
I mean, you might do after listening to the albums before Bruce Dickinson became the lead singer because they're bad. But...
Or after Bruce left for a little while and they brought that Blaze Bayley guy in.
And then he came back again.
Yeah, there's a reason.
Yes, thankfully for all of us. But I think it's become this kind of cliche. It's like children using the Ouija board, or people having a seance, or you invoking spirits, or indulging in paganism or witchcraft. And if, depending on the cut of the jib of the person investigating it, they will always try and use these as invitational portals that have encouraged evil in, and you've no idea what you're doing. And I think often you can be in a negative space, and we've talked about bad energy and things like that, and I think there are things that react to bad energy that are just there. You haven't invited it in. It's just taking advantage of it because it feeds off it. And therefore it pushes the buttons. Morgan was saying there she was having a lot of problems, a lot of stress in the relationship. There was a baby, there was unwanted visitors. I would imagine money was tight as well when you've just had a kid and you're just starting out and you've got your first place.
I'm sure.
You know, you're living day to day, hand to mouth most of the time in those kind of situations. I'm sure we've all been there in our younger years. And
younger years.
Yes. Like yesterday.
Yeah, cough. Anyways, continue.
And so I think that kind of environment is more likely, through no fault of anybody, it's just life causes this rupture that encourages people. It's like if you keep sugar in a bowl with a lid on it, it's fine. As soon as you open the bowl, it'll be filled with flies because they'll just come for it because they can sense it, they can smell it, they know it's there. And I think when you've got a negative scenario building or problems going on, I think that is a very similar thing. Some of these spirits are like flies to the sugar bowl. They just flock from miles around because they can sense it, they can taste it, and they want it.
No, that's exactly it. Did you know that an an ancient test for diabetes was leaving a jar of urine outside and seeing if the ants went for it?
That wouldn't surprise me.
Well, apparently it has something to do with the amount of sugar in your urine that gets, because you're not able to break it down. So it's just passing through your body. Mm-hmm. I don't know. This has nothing to do with Morgan's story. You mentioned the sugar thing, and all of a sudden, because my brain is a real jerk sometimes, it's like, oh, remember the pee thing you learned, Brent? Thanks, brain. Thanks.
Well, it's like gin and tonic was invented to repel mosquitoes.
I had no idea.
Because of the quinine in tonic.
Really?
Quinine repels mosquitoes. That's why people drink gin and tonic. It originated in India as a drink by the British, and therefore drinking it, the quinine would normally be expelled as sweat, which causes an odour which repels mosquitoes.
I'll be damned. I had no idea. That's very good to know.
So yes, hot weather, drink G&T.
All right. You learn things when you listen to the Ghost Story Guys. And not just about certain paranormal podcast presenters. This story is called The Tower, and it comes from Kyla. Kyla says, I am slowly getting caught up to present-day episodes, and I am still greatly enjoying the show. 3 or so weeks ago, I finally heard the Missing Time episode, and it actually jarred a story loose that I hadn't thought about for a long time. My dad first told me this story when I was younger and greatly interested in spooky stories. I sometimes don't know what to make of this story, so you'll have to tell me what you think, or if you ever use it for anything. Well, when you catch up to the present day, Kyla, you will hear it. I currently live in Alberta and was actually born here. At one point, when I was 2 years old, my father was a certified air traffic controller. We lived in Lloydminster for a while, but things came to an end after my father was at work in the municipal airport tower one day and an F-1 tornado touched down. It was a little too dramatic of an event, and my mother was not impressed. The tower sustained some damage in the high winds, and while there was a lull during the rapid repairs, she urged him to look for jobs elsewhere. My father has long been passionate about planes and aeronautics, and when the opportunity presented itself for an open air traffic control position in Fort Simpson, Northwest Territories, he jumped at it. He'd been long entertained by stories of bush pilots and their adventures, so in no time flat, the small sports car was packed, and we headed north on an only partially paved road. And I know, just quickly, I know someone who used to work with bush pilots way out there in the sticks, and those guys are nuts. Some of the shit they've had to do to get planes in and out of locations, you got to be a little crazy to do it. Fort Simpson is a very small community right next to the Mackenzie River and more than a few hours away from Yellowknife. The runway was mainly intended for cargo planes and small bush planes, things like Cessnas, Beavers, and float planes. It wasn't the busiest runway, but it was a living, and everyone settled into northern living quickly. I was too. I really don't remember a lot of this time, just that we had lichen for grass in the backyard, and ravens that seemed like they were as big as medium-sized dogs. The story my father heard that he would later scare the lilies out of me with was a story that had happened to his coworker when we lived there. His coworker, Mark, not his real name, had only been there a few years before my father. He was roughly the same age, so maybe in his early to mid-30s at the time. One very cold February night, Mark was working alone on the night shift in the tower. The temperature was probably in the area of negative 36 degrees Celsius, so it wasn't super cold, but it did fall in the realm of cold you don't fuck around with. Mark was working on logbooks to pass the time. In the early 80s, in isolated places, much of their logbooks were still on paper. This is important to remember. At one point, maybe around 2 in the morning, Mark thought he heard a noise and looked up from his work. Looking out the wide windows of the tower, he saw a bright light in the sky. Immediately thinking this was some diverted plane or aircraft making an emergency landing, Mark threw on his winter gear and headed outside to check it out and possibly turn on the floodlights on the runway. No one was running powerful LED lights at this time. He remembers that he was looking up at the light as soon as he got out the door, and something seemed very strange. The air was vibrating around him with a low humming noise, and he realized the aircraft was there, in front of him, not at the far end of the runway as he'd previously thought. As he was looking at the blindingly white light, wondering what it was, he began to feel pressure on him from above. He said it was like being pushed down to the ground with a big piece of compact plywood. The only thing he remembered after that point was waking up back inside the tower. He was sitting in his chair, the lamp on, and his winter gear was scattered around him on the floor. Even his boots had been removed. He was all alone, same way he'd been when his shift had began. It was 5 a.m. 3 hours had passed, and he didn't remember any of what happened in that time. He checked himself immediately for frostbite, thinking something had happened to him. He had no injuries, no mysterious pains. Maybe a slight headache, like he was dehydrated, but he otherwise felt fine, other than being totally freaked out. He was not new to night shift, so he highly doubted that he'd simply fallen asleep and had a bad dream. Glancing at his logbooks, he suddenly became greatly disturbed. The logs for 2:30 a.m. to 5 a.m. had been written into the book. The problem was that the writing was not his. It was barely legible and had qualities to it that in no way matched his own. He called my dad at our government housing. They were very weird, tall green metal buildings, and told him he wasn't feeling good and wanted to go home. When Dad arrived to switch places with Mark, he'd been surprised at how freaked out the man seemed. Mark told him what had happened, but even now, when my father talks about it, he has no idea, truly, what happened that night. So, thank you, Kyla. Paul, thoughts?
Northwest Territories, no surprise.
How so?
It's a well-known hotspot. There was a massive flap there in the mid-90s, UFO sightings in that particular area.
Oh?
Both, I think, 90, 96, 97. I think there was like 50 separate reports of unidentified flying object in the state, the province at that point.
50.
Yeah.
Wow.
In those 2 years alone. Yellowknife's quite a hot spot. I know there's a lot of sightings around the Hay River. And is it the Great Slave Lake or some other weird name thing?
Great Slave Lake.
Yeah. There's as long as people have been recording UFO sightings in Canada, there's been consistent sightings from the Northwest Territories.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Very curious, Kyla. If you could let us know, I don't think it was part of your email. I'd be very curious to know if this falls into that 90s window period.
Yeah. Like a major flap, which nobody could explain. And it was all kind of centered around that area from Fort Simpson down. So I think it follows the rivers down into the Great Slave Lake.
Interesting. So what were people seeing?
Numerous strange objects. I mean, there's some weird reports from there. I know there's a very odd report from the 1960s about two gold prospectors who were just chilling out and a great big ball with spikes on the sides crashed in the river next to them and started just spinning around, churning everything up. But yes, so these two gold prospectors just saw this enormous spiky ball land. It churned all the foliage up and caused a massive splash and was spraying water everywhere and then just sunk. So they were naturally terrified. They called the Mounties. The Mounties turned up, found all the debris and everything, said that there wasn't a geologist available and therefore it could only be a meteor, and that was the end of it.
I mean, I'm no meteor genius, but I've never heard of a spiky meteor that stays in one place and thrashes around.
No, exactly. So there's lots of strange things. There's people claim that people who disappear in the Northwest Territories have been taken. They don't disappear into the wilderness. They're taken from above.
I mean, is there any sort of detailed thought on who is doing the taking?
No, not really. I mean, there was a massive flap in the Northwest Territories a year ago, wasn't there? Beginning of January?
I had no idea.
There was a famous flight recording that was released to the media where some pilots saw strange lights above the Northwest Territories. I think that was near Yellowknife, and reported it in, and they released the audio. And they were claiming to have been followed by something. And they just said, we're not alone up here. There's something with us.
So I just found the article. And yeah, they asked the tower. It's going from Fort McMurray to Yellowknife. And the tower says, negative, I have no reported traffic in the area. Do you have a visual on something? To which the plane replies, yeah, we're looking at two lights dancing around here to the east of your field. They're above us about, I don't know. We're not seeing them on TCAS, which is the Traffic Collision Avoidance System, but we can see the lights moving around. The tower responded, I don't have anything on the radar either. Let me talk to Center, likely referring to what's known as the Area Control Center. The article goes, and this is an article from CTV News. The article goes on to say, a moment later, the air traffic controller was back on the radio. Hey, Center doesn't have anything about any movement in the area, so I'm really wondering what you're seeing there, they said. The flight responded, yeah, so are we. The tower responded to them, all right, I'm trying to look. I don't see them from the ground here, but we'll keep an eye out. I'll talk with Center again. It looks like they have absolutely no idea what this is, because the air controller comes back on the radio to ask what color the lights are. They reply with white. And then the tower says, Roger, thank you. And it's not actually funny. I understand why they do this, because I know there is a huge stigma. The crew member on the plane says, we're not crazy. To which the tower responds, no, we believe you. And so it's just really, really interesting stuff. And I'll try to remember to put a link to the show notes, or pardon me, a link to this in the show notes. I know every time I say that I don't do it, but I'm going to try and make a point to do this because this is fascinating shit. Whenever it's spotted by professional observers, I'm always really interested. Like remember that big one at O'Hare Airport years ago?
Yeah.
that everyone reported, and then they tried to pass it off as nothing?
There was a cloud formation.
Yeah, right above the runway.
Well, they always do, It's Venus, that's all.
Yeah. That makes total sense.
It'd be interesting. I know, obviously, Canada's premier ufologist is a gentleman called Chris Ratowski.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see if he's ever covered UFO reports from the northern area of Canada. I would imagine he will have done.
Oh, I have to imagine. Like, I think because the government used to collect these kind of reports, and then if anyone gets in touch with them now, they just refer them to Chris.
Or so they say.
I think I told you before, my stepfather was part of a unit in the Air Force back in the 60s that used to respond to these kinds of reports. They would interview commercial pilots.
Yeah, it obviously goes against what Paul Hellyer was saying for decades as well.
I'm not familiar with Paul or what he said.
Was Paul Hellyer like your head of the Canadian Air Force for a while?
Paul Hellyer was a Canadian engineer, politician, writer, and commentator, the longest-serving member of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada. Yeah,
he was a full-blown UFOs are here and they are real and we're covering it up.
Interesting. On June 3rd, 1967, Hellyer inaugurated an unidentified flying object landing pad in St. Paul, Alberta. And then in early 2005, he made headlines by publicly announcing he believed in the existence of UFOs. He was a speaker at an event in Toronto where he told the audience he had seen a UFO one night with his late wife and with some friends. In 2007, the Ottawa Citizen reported that Hellyer was demanding that world governments disclose alien technology that could be used to solve the problem of climate change. Oh, I see. I don't know. So this just seems like a guy who's starting to lose his shit, because he gave an interview with RT in 2014 where he said that at least 4 species of aliens had been visiting Earth for thousands of years. And when people start saying shit like that, I think, okay, so you've either had a psychotic break or you've hit your head really hard or someone's paying you to say this. I never understand the point of disinformation campaigns like that, because I know that's a thing. I know that like disinfo campaigns within the UFO community are kind of a big deal, but I don't really understand why.
Because it marginalizes the experiences and stops people being frightened.
Interesting.
Well, they can't stop it, can they? Can't do anything about it. None of them can. Russians, the Chinese, the Americans, us, you, can't do anything. So if they're coming to take people, could you imagine the reality of a government saying to its people, yes, we are being visited and we don't know how to stop it?
Yeah. Did you ever see the movie Dark Skies?
Yes.
I really liked it. I thought it was pretty creepy. And that was, I think, one of the most upsetting moments is when they visit the character played by J.K. Simmons, who essentially tells the parents of the child who's being kind of manipulated by unseen forces that there's nothing we can do.
Absolutely. And you just think at how many experiences and people claim to be abducted. And, I've heard certain people claim that there are things you can do, you can sort of protect your house and everything. And yet you would suggest in the vast, vast majority of cases, none of that works. I now know people who claim to have been dematerialized through solid walls and taken out of their houses when they were taken. So it doesn't really matter if you lock your door or not, because you'll just face through it.
Well, that's it, right? I mean, there are so many uncertain things that I think it's almost, like if you're doing anything like that, you're just doing it to help yourself feel better. Because whether they come from across the stars or from the spaces between spaces, whatever you want to say, they are operating at a level that we cannot possibly touch. And, like we talked about this on a show a while back, how, some people say that, well, in order to stop any negative phenomenon, I always fuck up phenomenon, but you guys know what I mean.
Yeah, it's a very malevolent world.
But I think it's a mistaken thing to say, oh, all you have to do is X, because it sort of presupposes that you can control it all, which I think is just nonsense. I think if you could control it all, that would be a great argument for this all being in our heads, but you can't. I understand that that's unsettling because it puts you at the mercy of unseen forces. And let's face it, our lives are already being put at the mercy of unseen forces. But that is the nature of the world. Like we've put a huge amount of effort into making it seem like we're in control. We are the top of the food chain. We're the center of the web. Everything else extends from us, but we're not. I mean, ask someone in the path of a tornado, as with Kyla's story. Someone in the path of a tornado, how much of a threat they are to the planet. This kind of reminds me of something that Joseph and I talked about on a recent episode of Weird Together, where I really think that the climate change movement really fucked up by the way they framed their argument. Because I think if we had framed starting back in the 90s, because oil companies have known about climate change for a very long time. This has just been a document. They've worked hard to hide it, but their internal documents have been released, which show they know. But I think if we had framed the argument as we have to stop fucking around or Big Daddy Earth is going to smack our ass, we would have gotten so much better a result than our current campaign, which is Mother Earth. We have to take care of our planet. We have to save our planet. The planet's going to be fine. The planet's just going to kill the fuck out of us and then eventually just move on. But people, the kind of people you say, well, that you want to kind of listen to these things, they're not going to listen to respecting women. You're going to say, well, Mother Earth. Oh, I don't care. I'm not nice to my mother. Why would I be nice to Mother Earth? But Big Daddy Earth, he's going to take you to the woodshed. They'll respect that. That'll make sense to them.
I think the biggest problem is that the people that can make the biggest changes aren't going to be alive when the shit hits the fan, so they don't care.
Yeah.
What they're basically doing is that to their grandchildren.
100%.
Do you want to live in Mad Max? Good, because that's what I'm going to fucking leave you.
One last thing. I just want to go back to Kyla's story quickly. So Kyla, I mean, genuinely, I think this is, missing time. I think this is all, 100% missing time. Yeah. I think there was something, someone was taken. He was taken. Where, why, I don't know. But I think that's a case. And this bears a striking resemblance to that story from Strange, the trucker, because he had the same experience. A little bit, he remembers it a little differently, but basically he was, coming around a corner, and instead of the road going up, it went down. Instead of the road going up, it went down. And he was disoriented, and he realized he had lost about 2 hours, and he was in a completely different part of the road. And he was just left with this paralyzing fear of that particular road. And then he started having nightmares, and in the nightmares, he felt the same crushing sensation. In his nightmares, the cab of his truck was filled with a red light, and he felt that it was hard to breathe, and he felt the same thing. He felt pressed. So the similarities are impossible to ignore.
That's the air pressure as you're taken up.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't considered that. All right. So thank you very much, Kyla.
The Church, from Hazel. I work for a charity that provides homes and support for people experiencing homelessness. A lot of our properties have been donated by the church. Some of them used to be on the grounds of the Magdalene laundries. These were horribly abusive Catholic institutions where unwed and unwanted mothers were shut away many years ago here in Ireland. So, as you can imagine with a history like that, there have been a few spooky happenings on the job. That day I was doing some training that was due to take place in a big old church that had been converted into offices. It's so damn creepy in there. The main church hall is untouched and still has the high ceilings and an organ tucked into the corner. No one likes going in there after dark. I found myself wandering the office halls of this church that morning, searching for the right room. When I got to the third floor, I started to hear some chatter drifting down the hallway. Brilliant, I thought. I've found it. I walked towards the door, still hearing the indistinct chatter as I swung it open. I stood there shocked. It wasn't a conference room filled with colleagues. It was a storage room, piled high with old desks and chairs. And then I realised I couldn't hear anyone talking anymore. I stood frozen for a few moments, fear trickling down my spine. Then I just thought, nope. And I turned on my heel, quickly making for the stairs. Eventually I found a stray office worker to direct me to where the training was taking place, which thankfully was in a different building altogether. I also wanted to say I love listening to the Ghost Story guys. GSG has been a core part of my podcast rota for a while now. You guys are so funny and I love the banter. It never fails to make me smile. You guys helped me through a pretty hard time last year, and hearing you both talk about your own struggles so openly on the podcast gave me comfort. It helped me feel a lot less alone when I was really going through it, and from the bottom of my heart, I thanked you guys for that.
Hazel, thank you for saying so, and we're happy that we could help you through that. That's an honor.
Humbling, thank you.
As far as the story goes, I'm not surprised if that building was home to one of the Magdalene laundries, I'm not surprised. I tried to do a little research to see if I could find other stories of sort of associated activity in those locations, but there's so much writing on the Magdalen laundries just about the horror of them that it was difficult to parse. And honestly, I don't know if I want to go looking too deeply, just because it feels inappropriate for me to, like, obviously this is your story, Hazel, so it's, there's no problem telling that story, but it felt inappropriate to go digging deeper, just giving the scope of the horror that was that system.
I think the situation with that, obviously, it's finally seen the light of day over the last 20 years. Thank God for everything that those poor buggers went through under the auspices of the Catholic Church in Ireland, which, when you look at it, I mean, it's one of those things sometimes, especially here, we're very lofty on our perch here in England, and we often look down on everybody at the best of times. But I find it remarkable that Ireland is so close to us, and we often consider it as foreign to us as Kazakhstan on occasions. It really, we don't even show the weather there on our news reports. That we basically, they show a map of Ireland, and then they just show Northern Ireland, and so we can see Ireland, but there's no weather there. Weather doesn't happen in Ireland. We just see a blank map with nothing located on it, and it really annoys me. Because you're quite happy to show all our channels there, but you don't want to tell us where they are. It's ridiculous, But everything's getting on my nerves today. And I like Ireland, and I like the Irish. It's a fabulous place to visit. I recommend it to everybody who's never been. In fact, I'm looking at a map in my room here of the United Kingdom, right? So I've got all the counties of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and then the Republic of Ireland is underneath, and it's completely white.
Here there be dragons.
It might as well be lasers and ninjas written on it, And so for that to be happening so close to us and to be ignored, derided, belittled, I think, is still remarkable to me, because, like I say, we here at St. Patrick's Day, here, you can't shift for people, as we call them, plastic paddies. People whose only Irish blood is when they drink a pint of Guinness. That's the most Irish they've ever got in them.
Yeah.
For a lot of them. And so, for a country that seems to love them on a specific day of the year, it frustrates me greatly that we continually treat our friends from across the sea as so far away when the mood takes us, which really frustrates me. And so I think it's difficult to pick through such horror and abuse of real people in real situations without feeling a bit like you're gawking, or you're kind of picking through the bones of tragedy for some supernatural hits, where I think the reality of those people's situation is true horror.
I couldn't agree more. I found some interesting stuff, which I'll mention to the listeners in a moment, which I think is good because not everyone might be aware of the Magdalen laundries.
And the cover-ups and everything that went on. It's an absolute disgrace.
Yeah. And there's a documentary series, I think, on Netflix, which people can use as a resource. And also, and this I will remember to link in the show notes, I found a documentary by the Irish filmmaker Stephen O'Riordan. It is called The Forgotten Maggies.
Yeah.
And it played the Galway Film Festival in 2009. It's 52 minutes. It's streaming for free on YouTube. You will learn a lot about what happened at the Magdalen laundries. And honestly, it's kind of terrifying. It's like the residential schools here in Canada. The last workhouse in Ireland closed in 1996. Yep. So I'll link to an Irish Times article, which kind of breaks down that as well, and sort of the end of that. It's true. Again, we're not going to get into it here. I think it would, in order to do the topic justice, I think you'd need more time than we have. But I just think it is worth looking up. And again, I'll link those in the show notes. And also, if you want to take it from a fictional angle, another Irish filmmaker, very talented Irish filmmaker named Aislinn Clark, made a found footage film called The Devil's Doorway in 2018, which is set in one of the Magdalen laundries. And again, it's a very good film.
It's crazy when you, like you just said, the last one shot in 96. That's 26 years ago. So people were being ritually abused by the people that were supposed to be protecting them in the modern era. as though this is something that happened in 17th century Europe. And I just find it infuriating, the suffering and abuse that these poor people suffered at the hands of people who were there to protect them.
It's monstrous. There's no other word for it. It's monstrous. Mind you, like this is not an uncommon thing that, sort of in modern human trafficking. Because of bullshit like Sound of Thunder or Sound of Freedom, that movie that came out, or, there's this panic in certain circles about human trafficking, but it's always around some vague, nebulous, like nonsense action movie kidnapping thing. When in actual fact, what tends to happen is people come from one country to another with the promise of work and then are taken advantage of and put into positions where they're brutalized. They are in danger of breaking the law they think they're in danger of breaking the law if they go to the authorities. They have no choice but to accept the abuse heaped upon them. And often their families are threatened at home. I just finished listening to the book Tokyo Vice by Jake Adelstein. And he talks a little bit about this in Japan, in the district of Roppongi, where, some of these, because obviously they have hostess clubs over there where, men go to kind of, be fawned over by beautiful women. But in Roppongi, which is a district of Tokyo, there are clubs there which the hostesses are foreign. So they're foreign women. And the amount of human trafficking that happens there is gross. It's horrifying. It's monstrous. Again, back to that word. And he sort of breaks down a couple very specific cases, and it's just, yeah. So this shit is, again, Magdalene laundries are closed. Good riddance. And again, we should all learn about them and who is responsible for them. I'm not going to say here, but you guys know. And so that we can hold those people to account, but also never forget this is happening. And again, not in some fanciful, they're going to kidnap me off the corner way, but these are people being lured away from their homes with a promise of a better life and are being taken advantage of. And that is a nightmare. Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be people coming from abroad either. It can be people down on their luck, struggling.
That too, yep.
In every street, in every city, in every country in the world, by people from that same place. We had some big modern slavery raids last year here in Sheffield. I think they found something like 130 people who were being forced to work.
Oh, God.
That's, 10 to a room and all that shit. And given like a tenner a week to live on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's it. Oh, no. Again, this is probably darker than we want to go on the show to really get into it, but it's a horrifying subject. And I think it's a conversation worth engaging in for folks who don't know and just being aware of these things. Because, again, we can't fix it. Don't tear your clothes in grief at this kind of stuff, because if you let it, the misery of the world will swamp you.
Yeah, it's too much.
Yeah, that's it. It's too much. It is too much. If you let it, the sadness of the world will drown you.
Absolutely.
But still, it's good to be aware of things. Just, you try and have to keep it at arm's length, because you don't want to be ignorant, because then it's too easy, I think, to slip into complacency. But it's a fine line between awareness and letting that awareness dictate your mental health.
Absolutely.
Hazel, thank you again that's very interesting stuff. Again, that's the first ghost story I've heard from that situation, and I'm very, very grateful that you shared it with us.
Yes, thank you.
The Monk, from Jack. I know you get a lot of kudos for your mental health messages, and rightly so, but I want to add to the big love. Hearing men in particular share their experiences and normalizing discussing mental health is proper, inspiring stuff, and has led me to reach out to men in my life to let them know I care about them, and I'm only a phone call away if they need to talk. I also suffer with anxiety, ADHD, and dyspraxia, so the ease at which neurospiciness comes up in conversation on the podcast too is validating and makes me feel less of a freak. A screeching turn in subject matter, but bringing it back to ghosts, you asked for stories about spooky monks in episode 183, and I have one. It's a story from a while ago and happened to my late mum. She told me the story countless times when I was growing up. Not to scare me, but to reinforce her thoughts that ghosts do exist, but I should be more scared of the living than the dead. We support that philosophy 100% here. As you can imagine, other parents didn't appreciate me telling their kids that ghosts definitely existed because my mum said so. Using Emma from Real Life Ghost Stories' way of putting it, I was definitely the spooky kid. My mum grew up in an old farmhouse in rural Herefordshire. The main house itself was about 300 years old, but some of the building's origins were much, much older. It was about a mile away from the nearest village, which was easily walkable down a track from the farm to the main road, and then along the road to the small village. One evening when my mum was about 15 years old, this would be the late 1950s, She was walking down the track from the house towards the road to the village on her way to a whist drive. Up ahead, she saw a white blurry image which startled her, but she dismissed it, thinking it was one of the Shire horses that they still used on the farm. She thought he was leaning close against the gate, and the white blur was a patch of white fur he had on his nose. She was aware that the blur seemed to follow her as she continued walking, so she called out a friendly greeting to the horse. Charlie, his name was. She thought nothing of it and continued to the village. By the time she returned, it was completely dark, and she made her way up the track towards the farm carrying a brace of pheasants she had won at a raffle. Well, it was very rural, and coming home with dead animals to eat was quite common back then, I'm informed. I mean, in fairness, the Revelstoke Legion still does meat draws, so, it's not all that unusual. I should point out that electricity hadn't made it as far as my grandparents' farm by the 1950s, and didn't until quite a few years after my mother left home. It really is a very rural place. Anyway, yes, so it was rather dark, although apparently there was a bright moon, like some freaking horror movie trope. As she looked ahead towards one of the barns, she once again could see a white blur ahead of her. It couldn't be Charlie the horse, as it was bright and hovering a few meters off the ground. Slowly it took the form of a shrouded figure, and seemed to come down some stairs that didn't exist to ground level. As it got closer, she could see the shrouded figure was actually a monk. She screamed, dropped her pheasants, and ran up the driveway. My grandmother, a rather fierce old bat, came running out to see what the commotion was and was confronted by my mother hurtling towards her, screaming, "A ghost!" My grandmother responded rather calmly, "There's loads of the buggers around here," before turning and striding back into the farmhouse, leaving my shocked mother agape. She also went on to tell me once when she was tipsy that she thought this monk went on to become a sort of guardian angel and would appear to her at times of turmoil. That was until my older brother died of an illness, age 31. She never saw the monk again and thinks he went to look after my brother. This was all a bit too much emotionally for me at the time, and we never discussed it again. She has since also died of the same illness. I regret not asking her about it more, but I am glad she shared the original story and just her general creepiness with me. I've never found any evidence that the farm used to be a monastery, but I know local people used to say it was, and I suppose it could have been, and also been a victim of the dissolution of the monasteries that then had a farm built on it. Or maybe it was a farm owned and operated by a monastery. I should do more research. The farm is no longer in my family, and now has a charity based within its grounds that helps people with mental health issues by providing space, by providing peace, quiet, and countryside. I think I've just made the connection that the farm helped my mother by providing the monk, and now it is continuing to help people with this charity. And, Jack, that could very well be.
Herefordshire. It's one of the England's forgotten counties. It always gets overlooked. It's like Worcestershire. It always gets overlooked because it's smack next to Wales, and therefore a lot of people just ignore it because you go through Herefordshire on your way down to the southeast. So a lot of people just go through it. But it's a lovely county with lots of history and some beautiful areas.
Interesting. So what are your thoughts on the story?
I wouldn't be surprised. There's a lot of monk stories from Hereford. I think is there a Randy Monk of Tillingdon or somewhere down there that occasionally nips people's bottoms, I believe, and there's supposed to be ghostly monks seen at Hereford Cathedral. I wouldn't be surprised at all, and along with shucks, I would suggest monks are one of our most prevailing ghostly sightings in all parts of the United Kingdom.
They do seem incredibly prevalent. I mean, I know we did that show based on the works of Ruth Roper Wilde, and I think there's probably more. I think most of those sightings were taken from the first two books of These Haunted Times. I have no doubt there's more in later volumes.
I mean, I think because you've got this massive upheaval in the 15th and 16th centuries and the whole dissolution of the monasteries and the removing of the Catholic faith as the overriding religious power in England and Wales at that particular time. And so you have a lot of history, a lot of death, a lot of destruction, as well as the fact that the Christian church has been here for the best part of, I don't know, well, fully, I think Britain was fully anglicised by about the 6th century AD, I think. It always makes me laugh that the last place in England to convert was the Isle of Wight because they missed it on the way up. They landed 50 miles up the coast and didn't realise it was there till they came back down.
That's great. It's like when you've left the house and you've forgotten something behind and you're like, no, I'm not going back for that shit.
I'll sort it later. It's not important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, here in Sheffield, we've got ghostly monk stories. I would imagine every major city in the UK, and even probably most towns, have a ghostly monk story. They are everywhere in this part of the world.
The thing that really leaped out to me about this story specifically was the moment where the monk seemed to come down stairs that weren't actually there. There's something about that that's clicking with me. Because we've had all these stories of high strangeness on stairs or near stairs.
Yeah.
I've always thought there's something about that. There has to be something, again, to do with angles or some kind of geometry involved. I think the fact this thing came downstairs, I think that's really significant. Again, I don't know how. I just feel like it is very significant.
Yeah. One of those things, like Jack says, I should do more research. I think we all should, really, because history is underneath our feet, especially here in England. I mean, when I did the ghost walk the other week, I'd never even realised the amount of times I've walked over an old plague pit in Sheffield that was dug up. Yeah, I didn't even realise there were plague pits here in Sheffield till the other week. So it shows you that the places you think you know so much about, very often you know very little. I mean, I knew nothing about a bearded woman who became a massive sensational draw at the end of the 19th century in Sheffield, and pubs were fighting over her to have her perform in their establishments until she mysteriously was found dead, and the police ruled it as an accident because she fell forwards onto the pavement and accidentally caved the back of her head in.
Oh.
But it was an accident.
Natural causes. Can't live with the back of your head caved in. Nothing more natural than that.
Absolutely. So, and these are all happening in places I've walked through and walked past that I had no idea about. So it just shows you. So I would always say to somebody, if you've got an inkling of a bit of history, dig into it. Get into the church records, see if there's anything in the local parish council, because more often than not, your local library will have records that go back, and very often, if you ask nicely, they'll be very polite and help you out, and be more than accommodating for anybody that wants to come along. They're probably happy not to see some sort of bearded old man in his 60s bothering them, and if anybody under that age who understands what deodorant is, they'd probably be delighted.
Actually, I caught an Uber from the Review Cinema in Toronto back to the bar where I was meeting my friends, and the driver was not wearing deodorant, and it was warm when I was there that weekend, and it was so pungent, we'll say aroma coming off this gentleman. I actually had to roll down my window and kind of stick my head out, and he said, "Oh, I can turn up the AC," and I was like, no, thanks.
You sure he wasn't wearing tiger blood?
Unless he was the Toxic Avenger, there is no reason for him to naturally smell like that. Good Lord. And I wanted to leave him like 1 star because I didn't tip him, because I'm like, well, this is disgusting. This is bad. Because like, look, I have deodorant. We all sweat, right? I mean, Jesus, when we were in the room for your lecture last year at the conference, our listeners that were sitting next to me, I feel for them, because I'd been sweating for like 2 hours in that shoebox of a room. I smelled like a corpse, but I'm not driving an Uber. And so I was all ready to give this guy, leave him a 1-star review and think, fuck you, buddy. And then I realized I left my wireless headphones in the back seat, my earbuds. And so I had to contact him, and he was so sweet and so accommodating at bringing the headphones back to me at the bar. He wasn't going to charge me anything to do it either. Not only did I have to give him 5 stars, I also had to give him a $20 tip. Because I thought, you stink, brother, but your heart is pure. So, fair enough.
And a can of Axe.
Yeah, thrown into the car from a safe distance.
Drive-by spraying.
Like a grenade. Thanks again, Jack.
Lost things from April. I wanted to write to you about a weird incident that happened recently. I don't know if you may remember me, but my husband passed away in September 2023. And Paul mentioned that my husband might make himself known to me in other ways than in just a dream. I think it may have happened. On Monday, March the 11th, I went to work as usual. A few hours passed and I went to use some hand lotion after using the bathroom. The soap in the restroom is drying. Before I use lotion, I always take off my 2 rings. The diamond engagement ring my father gave my mother is on my left hand, and a new ring, a cremation ring made from my husband's ashes, is on my right hand. But the cremation ring was gone. I was stunned. There was no way it could just be gone. The fact I only noticed whilst I was at work was bizarre, but hey, it's Monday and I'm tired. I started going through my morning routine in my head, and then through the weekend. I'd never taken the ring off. You remember how I mentioned that I use lotion at work because the restroom soap is drying? Well, when I'm at home, I seldom do that. I have, without a doubt, only used lotion twice at home since I've gotten my cremation ring. I remember both times because the first time I did forget to put both rings back on, I was sitting on my recliner with a blanket on my lap, and when I moved to get up, I heard the distinct clink of metal and realised that my rings were sitting on the blanket. The second time I told myself, "Don't forget your rings like last time, dummy," and I didn't. So that weekend before my ring went missing, I know I hadn't used lotion. I didn't take the ring off for any reason. Okay, so maybe for some reason had it fallen off? I kept wondering about that, but it fits perfectly. How could that be even possible? Let me pause here and say I would usually at this point panic. I should have been fretting terribly and probably left work to go home immediately to search my home and car. But I didn't. I was strangely calm. I don't know what bearing this has on the story, but it was just very strange for me not to be panicked over the loss of something so important to me. Anyway, I went about my day at work, went home, and I kind of searched. It was weird. I wasn't tearing the apartment apart. I looked around my chair, the floor, the stairs leading up to the second floor, around my bed, in the bed. I shook all my pillows out. I looked around the floors, the bathroom, in the bathroom sink drain. I didn't find it. I didn't get upset, though. What I did do is say out loud, "David, I've lost my ring. Help me find it, please. I've no idea what happened or where it could be." When he was alive, if I had lost my keys, for example, he'd say, "Did you check your tote bag?" I don't use a purse, but I carry everything in a little tote bag when I go to work. Of course I checked it. I always check it, but he'd look anyway, and it would piss me off. I'd say, "I looked already, I'm not stupid." He'd tell me, "I don't think you're stupid, but you're frantic and in a hurry." Sometimes he'd find what I'd lost in the tote bag. Sometimes the lost object wouldn't be there. So once more I asked him to help me look. Mind you, I hadn't had any dream visit yet or signs of any kind that he was still around. Part of me was okay with that, because I prefer knowing he'd moved on to somewhere that is free of the pain and misery he had whilst he was still alive. But I would still talk to him in my head, or even out loud when I was alone at home. I guess some people might think that's a little unhinged, but I don't care. Anyway, 4 days go by, and there's no ring. I do some more cursory searching when I get home from work every day, but nothing serious. But I'm just still not upset about it. It's so weird. I do miss it, though. I keep grabbing for it when I'm idling, thinking about what or what not's there. On Thursday, March the 14th, I came home from work, both hands full of plastic grocery bags and my tote bag. My keys were in my left hand after I'd unlocked the front door. When I come home in the evenings, I always hang my tote bag on the doorknob of the hallway closet, to the right of the entrance. It's a small entryway with the washer and dryer to my left, and the hallway closet to the right. On this day, I went to reach out and drop my tote bag on the doorknob without dropping my groceries and froze. I'd only just stepped into the apartment, and the sunshine from outside illuminated the entrance floor, where, on the floor, in front of the hallway closet door, sat my cremation ring. I was stunned once more. How the hell? I immediately put the ring back on my finger, and I said to the empty apartment, "Thank you, sweetie. I don't know how I lost it. I don't know why it was there on the floor near the closet door. I just assume or guess to choose to believe that David had found it. I also kind of think, and this is weird, I think David took it. I know that doesn't make sense, but what if this was his way of telling me he's here? I've tried to fling the ring off my hand by shaking my hand up and down and all around like a crazy person, but it doesn't budge past my knuckle. I've washed dishes with the ring on, and it's never slipped off either. It fits me well. There's no reason for it to fall off, and I have no doubt that I did not take it off. So there it is. Any thoughts? Thank you for your kind words in the past, and for reading this mess of a story. I hope you guys stick around for a long time. Much love from Louisiana, April. Thank you, April.
Yes, thank you. And of course we remember you. So no need to worry about that.
Yeah, when you share such personal and wonderful stories with us, it's hard to forget you.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, April, I'm not the kind of person who is given to saying things like, oh, it's a sign, right? Or it's a message or whatever. But I don't think you're wrong. I think that's what that was. I had this thought when Paul was reading the story. I was thinking about something I read a long time ago. Well, not that long, a couple years ago. It was an article in, I don't know, maybe Scientific American or something, but they were saying that one of the problems facing the search for extraterrestrial life is that we are so locked into the idea that life outside the universe, life outside this planet, that life on other planets has to look like what we acknowledge life to be before we sort of deem it as alive. And the author was making the claim that this actually might really be kneecapping our ability to detect these things, because it is very hard to know what constitutes life. We know what constitutes life here because this is the world we are used to. And while, of course, we've discovered, that there are elements on our planet which are common on other planets as well. So you can reasonably sort of extrapolate that the universe is made up of all the same building blocks. But there are a trillion configurations that those building blocks can be arranged into. And so to assume that they will all be arranged into a configuration which will, if it spawns life, will spawn life that is recognizable to us is kind of silly. And I feel this way about visitations. And as Paul was talking, I was thinking, I feel this way about communication from our loved ones after they're gone, because I really think that life beyond this world is probably very different than life in this world. And I think it is probably different in such a way that it is difficult to identify. And I think that that's why visits often don't come the way we want them to. They don't come like, again, it would be nice to have a dream. It would be lovely to have a dream, but we don't always get the dream. And I think if this was just wish fulfillment, we'd all get the dream, right? You want it bad enough, you get the dream. So I think that, they come to us as best they can, because where they are now is not analogous to where we are now. We cannot possibly comprehend life after death looks like, because it is as different to us here in this world as some far-flung planet is to our experience on Earth. It might be similar elements, but the arrangement is so different as to be unrecognizable. That's just sort of my theory that came to me as Paul was talking.
Yeah, and I think the fact of where it was found, for me, says, I think it was David. Coupled with the fact that there was no panic, as though whether you realised it or not, you knew that, April.
Yeah, I think that internal calmness says a lot.
Yeah, definitely. The fact that it was positioned for her to find, where she always hangs the tote bag up, where they would always talk about lost things being or not being, for me, says it all, because therefore the ring is obviously a connection between April and David, because it is a symbol of David every day for her, with it being his ashes. And for it to appear there in the part of the room where she would always hang that bag, for me, speaks volumes. And like I say, not every experience is the same. And certain people or certain things will happen very differently for individuals. But clearly, that was a very specific and intelligent way of just saying hello.
No, I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, April.
Thank you. Yes, it was beautiful. Thank you, April.
And if you have a story you want to share on a future episode, please do send it to us, ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. We would love to read it. I don't typically respond too much in the way of email. I respond where I can, but I always read everything. And again, we try and fit as many as we can in Talk Spooky to Me episodes. And for stories. Again, we try and fit as many as we can into main shows. And I think we've got the next couple episodes will probably be topic episodes, but I think for maybe 192, 93, we'd like to have more listener stories. And it's filling up, but still, there's always room. We love, love, love reading what you send. So again, send that to ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with our Ghost Force shoutouts. Hey there, listeners. Before you reach for that skip 15 seconds ahead button, I promise you this isn't an ad. We wanted to take a minute to talk to you about mental health. On this show, I've always tried to be as honest and open as possible about my struggles with depression and anxiety, because even though we've come a long way towards acknowledging the very real damage these things can do, there is still way too much lingering stigma about reaching out for help. And when you start to feel like there's no help, it's easy to start feeling like there's no hope. But Paul has joined me today to remind you there is always hope and there's always help.
We're not going to try and talk you out of self-harming right now, because we know that's not how it works. Instead, what we wanted to do was tell you something now and hope that should things get bad, you'll remember it and make a phone call or send a text message before you make any permanent decisions. As someone who knows all too well just how important mental health can be, it's never too late to reach out.
In Canada, the number to call is 133-456-4566. In the USA, the new number to call is 988. That's 988.
In the UK, the number to call is 116123, or text SHOUT, that's SHOUT, to 85258. In Australia, the number to call is 131114.
However bad shit seems, it will pass. And no matter what your brain might be telling you at any given moment, and believe me when I say I know this intimately, there are people who love you, and people who care deeply about how you treat yourself. Should a time come when you find yourself despairing, please know that we've both been where you are, and there is a way back to the world. Take care. Welcome back. The Ghost Story Guys are Luke Greensmith, who helps us find our stories and is the host of the Folklore podcast. Tanya Downing, who helps with our editing and manages our Facebook community. She's also the host of the Streaming into Madness podcast with Walter Whitaker. Adam Lynch, who edits our video and is host of the Weekly Creep podcast with Dulce. Joseph Camo, who manages our YouTube account and is the creator of the Sociology Professor YouTube channel. Sarah Kent, who manages our Reddit community.
Our supernatural pilot as we search the skies for spirits is Mr. Brennan Storr.
And my co-host is, of course, the one, the only, the inimitable Paul Bestel, the paranormal Johnny Carson himself, host of Mysteries and Monsters. Paul, what's coming up on M&M?
Well, this week we're diving into some UFO stories with the marvellous Preston Dennett, including some strange stories where the US government tried to tell astronomers that they don't know what they're looking at when they report seeing UFOs, which is an interesting standpoint to take.
I'll say.
Strange stories of aliens trying to kidnap dogs, and various other weird things. You'll be amazed at how many of these weird stories are out there, and Preston's brilliant at pulling them together in his latest edition of his Not From Here series.
Very cool. And where can everyone find you online?
You can find Mysteries and Monsters across all social media platforms and podcast sites.
Fabulous. I'm Largely the Truth on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd. And you can find my horror movie show, Weird Together, co-hosted with Professor Joseph Camo, everywhere fine podcasts live. And again, that's Weird Together. As we said at the top of the show, we couldn't do this without our patrons, and Apple Podcast subscribers, and again, soon, our YouTube subscribers. And while every single person helps make us who we are, patrons are the ones who truly, truly allow this to continue. If you sign up at patreon.com/ghoststoryguys or to Ghost Story Guys Premium via Apple Podcasts, you get access not only to early ad-free episodes, you get bonus conversations between me and Paul, you get episodes of the show Host Adventures, which is where I kind of talk about what's going on in my life, and you get all these going back to 2020, really. There's stuff going there all the way back to 2020. There's dozens, if not hundreds of hours of bonus content in there. And I've also started recording paranormal articles as well. So we did one on Hong Kong University a couple weeks ago. I also released one on haunted ski resorts, and I'm going to be doing one on New York City coming up here as well. So these are articles I found, like lengthy articles on local hauntings that I will be narrating. And there's so much more. Live shows, all kinds of cool stuff. And you get all that at patreon.com/ghoststoryguys or by signing up to Ghost Story Guys Premium via Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you support the show at the $20 level and above, that makes you part of an elite club. And in fact, that makes you part of a little something that we like to call... Paul, what is it we like to call it?
Ghost Force.
That's right. Patrons of the $20 level and above get thanked here in Ghost Force every second episode because you guys are crazy, and boy, do we like crazy. This time around, the members of Ghost Force are...
Ethan Saragon.
Big Titty Kitty.
Bran wears a pink tutu.
Cackling Skull.
Cheryl Baker.
Crazy Mom.
T.
Flowy Two Hats.
Generic Bob.
Hannah Brown.
Hannah Siemens.
Hillary Dissasur.
Jade Moores.
Johnny Bonanani. Johnny Bonanani. Johnny Bonanani. I can't go that low consistently.
Try it.
I'm trying. We still have to record the whole episode. I'm gonna destroy my voice.
Okay. Jason R. Slaughter.
Slaughter. Jennifer Mullen.
Joseph Come On.
Kimberly Hansen.
Malevolent Clamato.
Mara Noriega. That actually works there too. Mara Noriega. Fantastic. I got a new weapon in my arsenal. A joke I've used 1,000 times.
Do it again.
Mara Noriega.
Mark Semler.
Megan Ruck. No, doesn't work that way. Megan Ruckett.
Merlin Hansen.
Nicola.
Peter Gunn 08.5. Pew pew.
Rebecca Brink.
Robin King.
Rockin' Roddy Shenanigans.
Samantha Ellis.
Schonensteyer.
Stefan Schwarzwald.
And Trent Kenner. You are the few. You are the spooky. You are Ghost Force. For real, guys, thank you so much. Again, we appreciate all our Patreon and Apple Podcast supporters, but Ghost Force, you guys are kind of crazy, and we are very grateful for it. If you want to have your name read out every second episode as part of Ghost Force, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. Currently, that is the only place, unfortunately, we can offer Ghost Force privileges, just because of the way Patreon's laid out. But soon, we should be able to make that part of YouTube as well. So, yeah, keep an eye on our socials, and we'll talk about it on an upcoming episode once that's locked and in place. So the second half of my interview with Soraya Askath on his show, Where Did the Road Go? That just went up today. So if you want to listen to that, check out our website at ghoststoryguys.com. We'll link to all of our guest spots there in the blog. Or you can search for Where Did the Road Go on YouTube or podcast platforms everywhere. If you want to pick up some Ghost Story Guys merch, head to our website at ghoststoryguys.com. There you'll find links to all of our merchandise. It's all print on demand. We have t-shirts, stickers, all kinds of cool stuff. And if you do buy something, make sure to send us a photo. We love seeing photos of you guys wearing our gear. And with your permission, we would love to put it on our social media. Last thing, please rate and review the show wherever you can. Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you get an opportunity to give us 5 stars, say a couple kind words, helps boost us in the algorithms, and is a nice little pat on the back for us. Shout out again to our composer, Rainy Days for Ghosts. Rainy Days for Ghosts is a project of film journalist and composer Harper Smith. You'll find more of Harper's work at rainydaysforghosts.bandcamp.com or by searching streaming platforms for Rainy Days for Ghosts and Street Witch. Our theme song, Radio, Into the Darkness We Go, is composed and performed by Peter Kursov of Pizzanta Music. Find more from him by searching for Pizzanta Music wherever you get your tunes. And I guess that's going to do it.
We'll be back next week, but until then...
Johnny Banana. Couldn't help myself, folks. But where was... Oh, yes. Into the darkness we go.
Are you recording live from the Indy 500?
This fucking street, man. People literally street race on my street. It drives me nuts.
And I thought we were struggling the other day when the local strange person decided to just set fire to his back garden.
Say what?
Why garden when you can just burn it all down?
Well, I mean, thinking outside the box.
I think he's working on some, ye olde crop rotation system. There's not wheat planted in there next week. I'm going to burn the rest of it.
Turns out he's not, into agriculture. He's just a pyromaniac.
Well, strangely enough, a couple of years ago, he set fire to loads of cardboard in his front garden, and one of his neighbours threatened to kill him because he said, "You've just watched me clean my fucking car." And then you've started a fucking bonfire. So now my clean car that you've just watched me do is covered in your fucking ash. Fucking ash!
Things are going well in your neighborhood. That's good. Everyone's happy.
Well, it makes a change when people arguing about running out of baguettes and lentils at Lidl. Where are the avocados?
Said with just the right amount of pomposity. I'm very impressed.
There's lots of that round here. Baby loves pain. Go, Neil. Sorry. I just lose it. I lose it when the word rush gets mentioned.
That's fair.
Am I reading it? Are you?
Sorry. Yeah, it's you. I read the last one. I wonder what the fuck was going on. Like, see.
Well, you said, and the next one's from... Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, that's my bad. Please go ahead. Continue.
That's okay. Yeah, I wasn't that spooky then. It's just how it happened.
I don't know. I just feel like that's the universe winking at you.
Who knew? Yeah, I was getting a hint there.
Yeah, yep.
And I didn't listen to it for 30 years.
Boy, oh boy.
It was a God wink.
Yeah, it's a one eye winking, all right. I'm sorry, Tanya. Tanya, I don't know if you're actually going to get this one or not. I might cut this one myself because I'm out of town Saturday. But if you do, boy, are you going to have some fun. That can all come out, please.
That was my favourite.
Really?
I don't know. I'm only joking.
You're just fucking with me. Okay.
Sorry.
You can't deadpan these things. The autism doesn't understand. Herefordshire? I was asking and then I realized I wasn't hearing anything. I went and checked and you're gone. I'm like, fuck. Well, I'm going to have to guess.
I didn't want to interrupt your flow by telling you I needed a flow.
I appreciate it. God, I find the concept of listening to the entire catalog of this show daunting, Paul. I lived it once. I can't listen to it again.
Well, as Julie said, she used to really enjoy the show till I started.
Amazing.
Well, to be fair, she does have to live with me, so,
Oh, yeah, no. Nick never listens to any of my shows, and I wouldn't expect her to.
Yes. People I don't live with enjoy them.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I always tell my friends, don't listen to my shows. Like, you don't have to do that. I'll even tell people, I'll meet someone, and they'll ask what I do, and so I have to say, I make podcasts. Oh, I'll listen to your show. Like, I will never ask you about it. I will never be that guy. I will never say, hey, did you listen to my show? Because that guy is a monster.
Yeah. Somebody introduced me to a stranger on Sunday after the match and said, this is Paul. He's got a really successful podcast. I was like, I just want to have a drink. I want to talk about how shit certain players were. I don't want to talk about Bigfoot after 3 pints. Well, I might do after 5 pints, but not 3.
Yeah. That's you gotta. There's a tier system getting up to Bigfoot.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially post-match.
Yeah, it's like when I was younger, people would say, "Oh, this is my funny friend Brennan." Don't do that. Don't do that, because immediately the person hates you. That is just they hate you because they're waiting for you to be one of those tiresome class clown guys who's just whackety schmackety doing his way through every social interaction, which is not me. And so being told, "Oh, this guy's funny," like, oh, I've lost this interaction before I've even begun. All right. Oh yeah, I was reading the story, wasn't I?
It's a bit Joe Pesci there you went up on.
What am I, a clown to you?